The lobby of the prestigious corporate office was buzzing with energy as candidates arrived, all hoping for the opportunity of a lifetime. Among them was David Carter, a sharply dressed man in a tailored navy blue suit, confidently rolling himself forward in his wheelchair. His presence was commanding, yet unnoticed by most, except for one person. Emma Reynolds, the company's HR manager, stood near the reception desk, scanning the applicants with a critical eye. The moment she spotted David, her expression shifted. A flicker of disapproval crossed her face before she forced a professional smile. She walked over briskly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Sir, I think you might be in the wrong place," she said, her voice carrying a condescending edge. David looked up at her, unfazed. "Actually, I'm here for the interview," he responded smoothly. Emma raised an eyebrow, barely able to mask her surprise. "The executive position?" she asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. She let out a small, dismissive chuckle. "I'm not sure how you even got through the initial screening, but this role requires strong leadership and presence. We need someone who can handle high-level negotiations and represent the company at the highest level." David remained calm, watching as she continued. "This position is highly demanding. It's not just about intelligence, it's about presence, strength, and the ability to command a room. I mean, let's be realistic," she said, gesturing subtly at his wheelchair. "This might not be the best fit for you." A few people in the lobby turned their heads, sensing the tension. David glanced around, noting their reactions. Some looked uncomfortable, while others pretended not to hear. Instead of reacting with anger, David simply smiled. "I appreciate your concern," he said, his voice cool and controlled. "But I think you should let my qualifications speak for themselves." Emma sighed, already making up her mind. "Fine," she said, "follow me, but just so you know, this might be a waste of your time." Little did she know, the real surprise was yet to come. David followed Emma down the hallway, his hands steady on the wheels of his chair. The office was sleek and modern, filled with high-ranking employees moving briskly between meetings. Emma barely acknowledged him as she led him into a large conference room where a panel of executives sat waiting. She cleared her throat and forced a polite smile. "This is David Carter, one of the applicants for the executive position," she said, her tone flat. Then, without hesitation, she turned to him and whispered, "Just try to keep up, all right?" before taking a seat. David didn't react. He had dealt with people like her before, the ones who judged first and asked questions later. He simply positioned himself at the head of the table, making direct eye contact with the executives. Some looked intrigued, while others, like Emma, seemed doubtful. One of the senior board members, Mr. Langley, adjusted his glasses and smiled. "Mr. Carter, welcome. We're interested in learning more about you. Why don't you start by telling us about your experience?" Before David could respond, Emma cut in. "Yes, and maybe you could highlight how you would handle the physical demands of this position. We need someone who can really take charge." Her words were carefully chosen, but the meaning was clear. David took a slow breath. He had built his entire career on proving people wrong, and today wouldn't be any different. "Of course," he said, meeting her gaze before turning to the rest of the panel. "I have over 15 years of leadership experience, including overseeing multi-million-dollar deals, expanding global operations, and successfully restructuring departments to maximize efficiency." A few executives nodded, impressed. Emma, however, remained unimpressed, tapping a pen against her notepad. "That's great, but leadership isn't just about strategy. It's about presence. Would you say you're capable of commanding a room full of high-powered individuals?" David chuckled, his confidence unwavering. I don't just command a room, he said, leaning forward. I build them. A few board members exchanged glances, intrigued. Emma, however, still didn't realize just how much she had underestimated him. The room fell silent for a moment, David's words lingering in the air. Some of the executives nodded subtly, intrigued by his confidence, while Emma pursed her lips, clearly unimpressed. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone she had already dismissed in her mind. Mr. Langley smiled, folding his hands together. That's an interesting perspective, Mr. Carter. Can you give us an example of a time you built something from the ground up? David didn't hesitate. Of course. At my last company, I was brought in during a period of decline. Sales were down, morale was worse, and leadership was struggling to find direction. I restructured the management strategy, introduced key partnerships, and within 2 years, we expanded into 5 new markets, increasing revenue by 200%. Some of the panelists exchanged impressed glances, but Emma only scoffed under her breath. Sounds like a great team effort, she said dismissively. I assume you had a strong executive team supporting you. David smiled, catching the underlying message. She was still trying to downplay his leadership. A strong team is important, he agreed, but leadership is about guiding that team, setting the vision, and making decisions that others are too afraid to make. He let his words sink in before adding, and when you've spent your whole life proving people wrong, making bold decisions becomes second nature. Emma shifted in her seat, clearly irritated. I just want to be clear, she said, leaning forward. This role requires someone who can be the face of the company. Our CEO works closely with investors, industry leaders, and international partners. That kind of presence is crucial. David tilted his head slightly, studying her. He could tell she still didn't see him as a real candidate. She had already decided he wasn't capable, without even realizing who he truly was. Before he could respond, the door suddenly opened, and the company's chairman stepped in. The entire room straightened in their seats. Emma turned quickly, offering a polite smile. Sir, she said eagerly, we're in the middle of an interview. The chairman's eyes scanned the room before landing on David. And then, with a knowing smirk, he said, Yes, I know. That's our new CEO. The blood drained from Emma's face. The room remained frozen in silence. Emma's forced smile wavered as she glanced between the chairman and David, confusion and disbelief flashing across her face. The other executives, who had been neutral or mildly curious before, suddenly sat up straighter. Whispers ran through the room as realization dawned on them. This wasn't just an interview. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it again, struggling to form a response. I don't understand, she finally stammered, trying to regain control of the moment. You mean he's a candidate for a different position? The chairman chuckled, shaking his head. No, Emma. David Carter is our new CEO. This meeting was never a real interview. It was a test. David leaned back slightly, watching Emma's expression shift from disbelief to something closer to panic. She blinked rapidly, her mind racing. A test? She repeated, her voice quieter now. Yes, the chairman continued. We wanted to see how the leadership team would respond to a fresh perspective. And more importantly, how they would treat someone when they didn't think he had power. His gaze hardened slightly as he studied her. It's always revealing, isn't it? Emma's face flushed. I wasn't trying to be unfair, she said quickly, her voice now edged with desperation. I was just making sure we were hiring the right person for the company. We have high standards here. David remained silent, his expression unreadable. He could see Emma's mind spinning, trying to justify her actions. The same woman who had scoffed at him just minutes ago. The one who had made assumptions based on his wheelchair instead of his qualifications was now searching for a way to backtrack. The other executives shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had been dismissive too, but Emma had been the most vocal, the most condescending. And now the weight of her words was sinking in. The chairman sighed, his expression serious. Emma, we hold our leaders to the highest standard, but that includes more than just qualifications. It's about integrity, fairness, and respect. Qualities that, based on today, may be lacking. Emma's breath caught. She suddenly realized this was no longer about David's qualifications. It was about her own. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she tried to maintain her composure. The weight of the chairman's words hung in the air, pressing down on her like a heavy stone. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but before she could, David finally leaned forward. "Emma," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "let me ask you something. If I had walked in here today as a man without a wheelchair, dressed the same, with the same experience, would you have treated me any differently?" Emma's face twitched. She knew the answer, but she couldn't say it aloud. The tension in the room grew thick as everyone waited for her response. The other executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some avoiding David's gaze entirely.